Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here, back with another car review, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the Alpina B7. So listen up, Alpina is an independent car manufacturer, but they're most notably known for tuning BMWs. And generally, their cars channel a unique characteristic, different than what you would get in a BMW M car. Being that I have a lot of seat time in this generation of the 7 Series, and that this will be the first Alpina I've ever driven, I'm really excited to see what this thing's all about. So let's get started with this review of the Alpina B7. Alright, so let's get started with the review by thanking Porsche of downtown LA for allowing me to review this Alpina B7 today. If you happen to be interested in this car or any other new or pre-owned Porsche product, make sure you give them a call. I've left their information in the description below. Now, let's start off this review by answering the question of what is a Alpina B7? Well, it starts off as a BMW 750i, then it goes to Alpina, where we'll receive a plethora of exterior, interior, and mechanical componentry changes, all of which I'll detail throughout this video. Then out comes an Alpina B7. And speaking of changes, let's start off with the exterior, shall we? So the front bumper is the same as what you would get in a 750i, but Alpina adds on a front chin spoiler with the Alpina lettering, and I'm not really a big fan of this unless you really want people to know that you drive an Alpina. I guess it's okay. Next, I'm going to move to the rear, where you get a deck-lid spoiler and a sportier looking diffuser that hugs the exhaust. All of these changes are functional and not just for show. But speaking of show, I do think that this is an absolutely beautiful car. I'm already a fan of the 7 Series, and this takes it to another place with its subtle sporty touches, but yet maintains the classic luxury looks of a BMW 7 Series. Add on the Alpina blue metallic paint, and this thing looks absolutely killer. So staying on the theme of exterior changes, I want to cover these unique classic Alpina wheels, but before doing that, let's talk about the suspension, because Alpina is tinkering with it as well. So this has the standard 2-axle air suspension with dynamic damper control that you would get in a regular 750i, but Alpina is tinkering with the software for those dynamic dampers, giving it a unique tune just for the B7. Now, this thing also has rear wheel steering, which is standard on the B7 but optional on other 7 Series BMWs, and this is very helpful for a car that has a wheelbase this long to help maneuver in shorter spaces. I found this to be very helpful in the AMG EQS that I drove. The S-Class, the new S-Class, has this as well. Now, moving to these wheels. So these are the classic 21-inch, 20-spoke Alpina wheels, and they're absolutely gorgeous. They're 21 inches on all 4 corners. They're by 8.5 up front and 11 in the rear. Wrapping them are Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires, 255s up front with 295s in the rear. Jumping inside the wheel barrel, you have 15.5-inch rotors up front being bitten onto by a 4-piston Alpina blue painted beautiful brake caliper, and in the rear 15.6-inch rotor, so the rear rotor is bigger than the front rotor, and it's being bitten onto by a single floating piston in the back. Alright, so this is an Alpina after all, so let's get to the engine tinkering. So this has a 4.4 liter twin turbocharged V8 making 600 horsepower and 590 pounds-feet of torque. It's mated to a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, and it's putting power down to all 4 wheels. Now, if you're keeping track, this has almost 80 more horsepower than a standard BMW 750i. And how does Alpina get there? I'm going to tell you. You've got modified turbos, pistons, intake, an enhanced cooling system, and they also tinker with the transmission mapping for crisper and faster shifts. All of this equates to a 0 to 60 time of 3.5 seconds, which is as fast as the Audi R8 V10 I drove a couple weeks ago. Now, an even more impressive feat about the Alpina B7 is its top speed, 205 miles an hour. Now, this was the fastest sedan in the world until it was recently dethroned by the Bentley Flying Spur with a 207 mile per hour top speed. So this thing is pretty serious about its performance capabilities. Now, this thing also weighs about 3,800, 3,900 pounds, so it's quite a heavy car, but expectedly so. It's a humongous 7 Series. But one other thing that Alpina does to this thing is give it a brand new sports exhaust system. So let me take you around back so you can listen to what this thing sounds like. All right, switching gears, let's talk about some practicality features, starting off with the trunk, and then we'll move on to the interior. There are multiple ways of opening the trunk. There's a button on the interior, there's a button on the key, there's comfort access right here, and you can also use your leg with the kicking motion underneath the bumper. And once you open this, it's the same size trunk as what you would get in a 7 Series. There are 18.2 cubic feet of space. You can fit 2 larger pieces of luggage in here. All of your day-to-day groceries, no issues. One thing to keep in mind, the 7 Series does not have the ability to fold down its rear seats. So if you wanted to fit longer pieces of stuff, for the lack of a better term, that you're carrying with you, you're probably going to have a shortage in the 7 Series. So closing the trunk is electronic closing. One thing I want to touch on as far as the rear end design, beyond just this really cool looking spoiler, is the Alpina lettering on the left and the B7 here on the right. And this is just common on all 7 Series, are the taillights. I really like the refresh look of the 7 Series' taillights, and of course those carry on over into the B7 as well. Now let's jump onto the interior and I'll talk to you about what's going on in there. All right, so now the interior of the Alpina B7, and I'm going to start off by saying that this example I have today is equipped with the BMW individual interior. This is an add-on option. The interior leather color is called Tartufo, and it's absolutely beautiful. It matches the Alpina blue paint on the exterior very nicely. It's like this dark cinnamon brownish color, very nice. It would look great with the Alpina green color as well. It adds leather all over the place on the dash. You get the brown stitching on the top here. It's Alcantara headliner. It's just so exquisite and enhances the luxurious feel of the interior in this B7. Now this option alone costs $4,000, so keep that in mind. There are other colors through BMW. It's a BMW individual option. You have to get it on your 750, and then it's baked in with your Alpina B7. So the changes in here as far as what Alpina is doing, starting off with the steering wheel. So this is an interesting steering wheel for 2 reasons. Number one, this is a hand stitch wheel, and it's got blue stitching up at the top of the rim here and green stitching at the bottom. So Alpina's colors, the Alpina crest here in the center. But the second interesting thing about it is the paddle shifters are replaced from the regular 750i, and they're kind of like these plus and minus items here, and they're like different they just look different. I suppose it's made because it cleans out the wheel. You don't really want to see the paddle shifters, but hey, if it was me, I don't think the paddle shifters make it look bad at all, but maybe the people at Alpina believe that. Next, the interior noise reduction is enhanced in the Alpina B7. How do they do that? There's new shielding in the rear wheel arches. There's also more sound insulation in the B-pillar and the rear back seats. And probably most notable is the thicker glass all around you. So 0.2 inches thicker glass in the Alpina B7 that you would get in the regular 7 Series. And this is to enhance the quietness, the luxury, the refinement in the B7. So you're not just paying for some of these knick-knack things that Alpina is adding on. Speaking of other things Alpina is adding on, the gauges, they're the standard 12.3-inch gauge cluster that you get in BMWs, but Alpina is changing around the graphics. There's more Alpina blue in here, so it gives it that personalization touch of an Alpina car. Then you've got down here next to your transmission controller the Alpina B7 plaque, reminding you that this is an Alpina car. Otherwise, it's standard BMW fare in here. It's just a regular 7 Series. The infotainment system is BMW iDrive. The screen is 10.25-inch touchscreen. No complaints here. You do have a really comfortable seat, so covered in that cross-stitching leather. It is heated, cooled, and massaging in the Alpina B7. There are infinite levels of adjustability, the thigh support, all these things. It's a heated steering wheel, and the backseat passengers also have a glass roof to stare out of. So it's a really, really nice interior in the 7 Series. And once I had the privilege of spending a lot of time in a 7 Series, I quickly realized the appeal of a car like this. It's very quiet in here, very nicely spaced, and even though it's a rather large sedan, obviously it's a full-size sedan, but it has a way to kind of shrink around you, and when you sit in other cars, you're like, oh man, I wish I could sit in my 7 Series again. So it gives you that type of feel, and it's obviously no different here in the Alpina, just enhanced with that level of quality and the interior personalization touches that you would get in a B7. So otherwise, now let's go to the driving portion of the review and see what this thing feels like behind the wheel. Alright, so now the driving portion of the Alpina B7, and as always, this is what the key looks like. It's just a regular 7 Series key, and because the Alpina B7 doesn't start off as a M Sport equipped 7 Series, you don't get the BMW M flag here, and probably properly so. Alpina probably doesn't want the M Sport flag in a Alpina car. Now, the rest of it, the interior does kind of shrink around you. Like I've said, it doesn't feel as big once you get used to it, but it does. It is a pretty sizable interior. For visibility out front is fantastic. Out the sides, out the back, all of that stuff, no issues. This does have blind spot monitoring, rear view cameras, actually 360-degree cameras, all of the safety features that you would get in a regular 7 Series. So now let's go ahead and turn this thing on. Foot on the brake, start, stop. And the V8 sound is fantastic in the in this Alpina B7. Of course, it's the same V8 sound that you would get in a 750. So let's go ahead and go for a quick spin. And to caveat this or give you my relative experience with the 7 Series, I'm very familiar with the 740i. Now, one of the things I forgot to mention during the interior portion of the review as far as changes goes, Alpina is changing out the motors for the glass to raise and lower it. And the reason why they do that apparently is to give it a more consistent sound and a more consistent raising and lowering motion. I personally couldn't tell a difference. The only thing that might be different is the way it opens, or once it's down to the lowest setting, it kind of soft opens and then it soft closes. That's really the only difference. Otherwise, personally, it felt the same as the 740 that I have a lot of experience with. So now what I'm going to do is put it in Sport Plus mode and make a quick turn here. And let's see what this thing can do. So I'm in manual mode 1. Wow. Woo! Holy moly, this thing can move. Wow, that was quite a rush and a surprise on how fast this thing is. Ooh, yes, the torque down low from the V8 feels fantastic, and this thing pulls really, really hard at around 3.5, 4,000 RPM. It really starts coming alive. Let's do one more here. Let me put it in manual mode. Yeah. Wow, very, very surprising on how quick this thing is. It really, really gets up and moves when you're on that throttle. Ooh, yes, it feels properly fast. Now, is it a sports car feel? No, you can definitely tell that this thing weighs a lot, almost 5,000 pounds in this car. So I'm not going to pretend like this thing is some sports car, but it definitely feels very, very fast in a straight line. So from a speed standpoint, there's no question this thing is extremely fast and rivals a lot of sports cars. Now, switching gears to the braking, and I wish this thing had a little bit more brake. Basically, this is the same braking system that you would get in a 740, and one of the things I wish it had more of is a braking feel right at the top of the pedal. I like a nice bite right at the top. I kind of don't want to squeeze it just to get a lot of braking power, and I feel like I really got to squeeze this pedal, and in reality this felt the same, or this feels the same as the 740i that I have a lot of experience with. So basically it's tuned for a daily driver comfort luxury type of braking feel as opposed to a sports car. Now, switching gears, let me turn down the AC. It's in auto mode. It's making a bunch of noise. Okay, now switching and talking about the suspension and the steering. Now, even though Alpina says that they're tinkering with the steering and the suspension, tuning it specifically for this B7, the only time I was able to feel a noticeable difference with these two aspects of the driving characteristics is when I'm in Sport Plus mode. I would say it's so marginal, maybe about 20% more stiff, and the steering about the same. It still feels like a luxury car, even in Sport Plus mode. This is not going to feel like a sports car, of course, because it's not a sports car, and that weight, I personally don't feel like there's much of a difference here. And even less so when I go in comfort mode. This thing feels exactly the same as the 740 that I have a lot of experience driving. But that's not to say that that's a bad thing. This is an extremely comfortable car. It soaks up all of the bumps and all of the uneven pavements. This is one of the nicer riding cars that I've been in quite some time, and rivals the new S-Class. So, with all of that said, what is this car? I think this is a car that provides a lot of heritage and something that people want, that brand association. Because if you just don't want a 7 Series with a V8, you could have gotten the 750. Obviously, this has more power, but if you want that heritage and that name, the weight behind Alpina, you're going to go for this. And some of the things that this has going for it is that it's a 7 Series underneath the skin. So from a driving comfort luxury standpoint, it feels absolutely fantastic. And from an exterior standpoint, if you're not with the M Sport Pack, you want something a little different on your 7 Series, this is going to achieve that while still maintaining some of the classy lines or the classical design that you get in a BMW 7 Series. So if you're into that, you want something very subtle and still luxurious and carries the prestige and the history, paired that with a 7 Series name, this is a fantastic car to drive. And of course, that straight line speed is just an added bonus. So I'm just going to stop here and wrap up the video. If you have any other questions, please make sure you leave me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.